Lots of people here are asking, how does something like this happen in a city with millions of people? This one road would have had hundreds of people in it, and these people were living there undiscovered for something like 30 years, more than 30 years possibly. Let's bring in the Conservative politician Andrew Boff. He's the author of a book called Shadow City, Exposing Human Trafficking in Everyday London. You just completed the book.
Yes.
How does this play into what you found?
Well, it exactly reflects the concerns that I was having about that report. Shadow City said there is another level of existence going on in London of people who are virtually enslaved, either in domestic servitude or in other sort of labour, and that we are missing a trick here. We are missing them.
We don't want to talk about this particular case,
yeah.
But it must be extraordinary as well for the people living in a street like this, where it's going on, and they find out later, probably feel a bit guilty. But how do these people tend to hide the fact that they've got these people hidden away?
Well, I think the problem is that people have assumed that trafficking is some other community's problem. They've been caricatured as being some ethnic manifestation of some ethnicity or culture, when actually trafficking affects all communities.
One of these women was British, one was Irish.
Absolutely, it affects all communities. And what we've got to also realise is that a lot of people have thought that trafficking has got something to do with organised crime. Well, in this case, and I think in many cases, you'll find, much as organised crime does involve itself in some trafficking, the majority of cases are actually quite informal arrangements, and therefore very difficult to pick up if the police are geared towards addressing organised crime.
It was interesting that the police here were heaping praise on the charity
Yes.
that first found out about this.
Well,
and actually the police didn't get, you know, they worked with them and allowed the charity to take the lead.
Yes.
So that was a great example of the voluntary and police sector working together.
Well, that's exactly what we've been calling for in our report, and we want more of that, because the fact of the matter is that the majority of cases of trafficking are identified by small non-governmental organisations working with the police. Unfortunately, all too often, when people go to those organisations or go to the police and say they've been trafficked, quite often they're not believed. So I'm very, very grateful that in this case, those people have actually been believed, and we've rescued some people. But I suspect there are plenty more in London and other capital cities around the world.
Joseph Fritzl held his daughter for something like 23 years. This is 30 years. We can't think of another case that's been longer. It's extraordinary, isn't it? It's an unbelievable case.
This is unbelievable because of the duration. But as I say, I believe this to be repeated throughout London, because we know that we're not looking in the right places for trafficking. And when we start to look, I think we'll unearth more cases of this kind of modern-day slavery.
We heard someone earlier being quite critical about neighbours in these situations, saying it's the neighbour's fault.
Yeah.
Is it?
No, I don't think it's the neighbours' fault. I think the neighbours have not been alerted to what trafficking actually means. And in fact, in the survey that we did in my report, we surveyed social workers, police officers and teachers. And what was astonishing was the level of ignorance of what trafficking actually is in a modern context. So we need to spread the message for, first of all, amongst professionals, but also the general public have got to be aware that trafficking is not somebody else's problem. You're never very far from a victim of trafficking in London.
Is there always something suspicious about a house where there's people being kept in secret? Because these people would have been kept in the house, the neighbours wouldn't necessarily have been able to be aware that they were there. But are there telltale signs that people can start looking out for in similar cases?
I think what's very important is that people shouldn't feel frightened about asking questions, about going to the authorities and saying that they have suspicions. If, for example, they're witnessing a child who is not going to school and is very rarely allowed out in the open. If you see, for example, a domestic servant of someone who is again very unforthcoming, very wary about their surroundings, it's okay to make an inquiry with the police. It's fine. It's only in that way that we'll identify these people. It was lucky that one of these victims, as we understand, saw a TV programme, but in so many cases it requires neighbours to be alert.
Andrew Boff, we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
for joining us. We at CNN, of course, have been looking at child slavery and all forms of slavery in recent months, and It's been an ongoing campaign for us. We've been working actually with the Metropolitan Police quite closely. You can get all the facts about the global scale of the problem by heading to CNN.com, where you'll find full details about our Freedom Project, hear from the victims, read about the traffickers, and see what countries across the world are doing to free those held in captivity. Just do head to CNN.com/freedom to find out more. Jim, we're not expecting any more briefings from here tonight. Those two suspects are being questioned.